So, in case you missed it, the new hot spicy thing to talk about is how expensive Tag Team Pokemon GX cards are getting. They are some of the most amazing cards from the, get this, Sun and Moon era. I know, remember that. And apparently, they're on the rise and creeping up in value even as of today. So in today's video, I found a slightly dated article, and we're going to look at the prices back then, and then compare them to the prices right now live on TCG Player. But before we get into it, as we always do, let's roll that intro. Hey Gengar Gang, what is going on? My name is Ryan, this is the Analytic Gengar, and welcome to another video. In today's video, friends, we talk about those amazing, lovely, most expensive Tag Team Pokemon GX cards. Now, today's video comes to us from tcgplayer.com, link will be down below. Hey, if you like today's content, or you think you're going to like today's content, consider leaving a like on the video, and hey, if you're not already, consider subscribing. It's been a weird month for the channel, not gonna lie, so I think it's the first time we've had one of those, though I hear from other YouTubers that it's a thing that happens occasionally. So if you like today's content, you know, maybe consider helping the channel out by clicking that big old button. But otherwise, let's get right on into this. So link down below and we start reading. The Pokemon TCG has introduced new rules on rule boxes for every generation, and so for the Sun and Moon era, one of the most interesting ones was the rollout of this GX card, and then a little bit later on, within the Sun and Moon era, they released the Tag Team card. So Tag Team cards effectively had two Pokemon on the card, and usually they had some sort of tag team power that made them very powerful. So in this case, you can see that you have a Celebi and a Venusaur, a Magikarp and a Wailord. You get the idea. Two Pokemon of the same type, usually. And yeah, they can kind of do some cool things together. They usually have a lot of very interesting effects on the game as well. So we keep on reading that tag team cards were introduced in Team Up during Sun and Moon era, so not necessarily at the very beginning of the generation, but kind of a little bit on, and it pushed Pokemon GX to an all new level by featuring two Pokemon that had shared at least one type. These tag team cards had higher HP, more powerful attacks, but came with the drawback of giving your opponent 3 prize cards if they were ever knocked out. If my understanding of the Pokemon TCG, which I definitely learned from this game and nothing else, is still correct, you only get 6 prize cards. So basically half your prize cards are gone if you're in a situation where one of your tag team Pokemon got knocked out. So the most impactful part of the cards, however, were that the GX attacks could be empowered with additional effects if you had enough energy cards for the requirement. So these effects could vary from higher damage, increased versatility, or add non-interactive effects that would last for the rest of the game. So pretty cool, kind of helped to define an entire sub-generation within the larger Sun and Moon era. So pretty cool. Whenever I look back at Sun and Moon, I definitely use this as a natural kind of breaking point within the Sun and Moon era, similar to the way that Battle Styles introduced alternate arts for Sword and Shield. I look back at Tag Team as introducing not only the Tag Team cards, but also alternate art versions of those cards, as those are some of, in my opinion, what would have been the most sought after, popular, and difficult to pull cards of that generation. So you might hear a lot of commentary about the Sword and Shield stuff. Bear in mind, you're just looking at the exact same thing that happened one generation ago. During the Tag Team GX era, nearly every competitive deck was built around one of these cards, so safe to say it's a very popular card in the trading card game. Why is that important if you're just a collector or someone who doesn't necessarily play the game but still likes to open packs, etc., etc., or someone who plays a little bit more casually? Well, usually what ends up happening is when folks open up packs for competitive play, they end up taking these cards and placing them into their deck. That means that sometimes they get used up. So an entire population of these cards could go to competitive decks, could be used in the trading card game, which, fun fact, the Pokemon cards are actually made for, I swear. And then, at the end of the day, sometimes they're not in the best of condition after weeks, months, even potentially years of competitive play. The other thing is that it creates a nostalgia factor for many people. So as these cards become more popular, they become talked about more, which means a lot more people know about these cards, appreciate these cards, etc., etc. And then, finally but not least, when this card is out of print, when there's only a limited amount of them left in the world and they're not available any longer on store shelves, they become increasingly popular. This card, the Gold Star Rayquaza, is one of the most popular examples of that. Very playable card that at the end of the day became the most popular Gold Star card. A lot of people attribute it to the fact that it's a shiny, a lot of people attribute it to the fact that it's an EX card and therefore very vintage, as well as hard to pull, but in the grand scheme of things, it would appear at least that a card like this one follows a similar trajectory to what we might be seeing play out with these tag team cards. They're very playable, they're very fun, they're very enjoyable, and that helps to create the type of inherent value in a card that honestly helps these cards really succeed in the long run if you look at them from an investment perspective. So, finally but not least, today we're counting down the top 10 cards that may have maintained their value even as their impressive reign in standard format has ended. So, here's the funny part now, because we actually have the live TCG player links. So every time I'm going to pop one of these open and we're going to take a look. So first up is Eevee and Snorlax GX. This is the secret rare, rainbow rare version. Nothing really much to say here. It is a pretty neat card, and if we pop over, it went from $100 and it is now $157 in lightly played value. So you can see here the chart has trended pretty significantly upwards. Yeah, it's absolutely bananas, but you can see here that, you know, the price is trending pretty solidly upwards. The, you know, top listing is $157. That is quite literally a 57% increase in value, and it's really cool to kind of see even a rainbow rare card, which historically has gotten a lot of flack for being not that great, getting some love. Now here's a card that is definitely getting a lot of attention right now, the Magikarp and Wailord GX. At the time of this article's publication, it was $245.38. If we open up, you're looking at $399. Now, I believe this is the listing that I have seen pointed to and kind of shown in a ton of other commentary videos as well as on Instagram. Similar story in terms of pricing. You notice that it kind of plateaus every once in a while and then it just kind of shoots up, and that's not uncommon for what is effectively a bull market, right? It'll kind of shoot to its new level, stay at that level for a little bit, see where market demand is. Bear in mind, this is a physical good, not something like a stock, so it does kind of follow a similar but somewhat distinct type of trajectory from a pricing perspective. And you can see here, right here is probably where either no one was buying or, you know, you never know. Then one came along, pushed the price up, and now we're looking at a $400 card. That's almost 75% price increase, which is pretty impressive for this card. Makes a lot of people wonder why people weren't buying these cards, which is actually one of the funny things about these particular cards. They were sitting on markets for a long time. Now, I have a theory as to why that is, but first, let's take a look at Gardevoir and Sylveon. So we were looking at a $190 card back in February. We're looking at a $301 card right now. Very, very similar graph we're seeing here, very similar to the Magikarp one that we were just looking at. So yeah, you get the idea. This is absolutely cool. And here's something really interesting. So oftentimes during these periods of time when prices are kind of testing new heights, what's going to happen is people are going to get these lucky breaks. So oftentimes stores list these cards not at market price, but at a price that they've predefined. So you're asked to literally type in the price as opposed to, you know, it dynamically updating based on certain conditions. As a result of that, if you are diligent, it's actually possible to get some absolute steals. And you can see here that someone within the span of 2 days was able to get 3 of these cards for $300, all supposedly, well, 2 of them near mint, 1 of them moderately played. But even the 2 near mints is an absolute steal, because the same day, if this is true, 1 sold for nearly triple the price. So all things considered, given that today we're looking at $301 for the same near mint foil card, that's a pretty good steal. And that's one of the things that I would definitely encourage anyone interested in these cards to at least attempt to do. Go out there and see what you can get, because you never know when you might get lucky, especially in this period of time when prices are so in flux that it is possible to get a pretty good deal. Just because prices are only as quick to react as people updating them. So this number probably has to be updated manually once a card sells for $400 on eBay and is a matter of public record. By the way, that Gardevoir and Sylveon, one of my favorite cards. Very, very pretty card. Obviously a very popular combination of Pokemon, so it's nice to see that that card still trends pretty highly. Obviously, we have those same cards, or very similar cards across a couple different sets now, so it is pretty cool to see. Pikachu and Zekrom, the Rainbow Rare, is the next one. Now, this was a $69 card. Very nice. And if we pop open TCG Player, we're looking at $104. Yucky. So that's about a $30 increase. We're looking at about a 40 to 50% increase in price. Pretty impressive. Now, this card, I know for a fact, is one of the most popular tag team cards. It's been featured in a league battle deck, so yeah, it's a very, very powerful card that was apparently very useful in various TCG formats, and as a result of that, they even went in as far as to kind of throw this into one of those entry-level products that was made for folks who wanted to play the Pokemon trading card game. And that just kind of goes to show you how legendary a card like this one is, and likely how very well remembered it's going to be in the future. If anything, I would argue this card or variants of this card is likely going to closely mimic the story of the Rayquaza Gold Star card. Not necessarily in terms of price, but just in overall themes. It's a very popular card. It got played a lot. It looks cool. Features some very popular Pokemon. As a result of that, it's likely going to age very well, similar to our very shiny friend over here. Now, Gengar and Mimikyu GX is up next. This is another card that I have seen featured very prominently in a lot of commentary, $245. If we pop open today, you're looking at a, yeah, I'll call it $400 card. So, there is that. Now, it makes no surprise to me, and it's definitely not because it's the mascot of this channel, but Gengar is by far one of the most popular Pokemon. Mimikyu has become a meme icon because it's basically not Pikachu. And yeah, all things considered, this was a really good card to pick up way back when. If we go back a year on this card, I mean, my goodness, you were looking at a $60, $70 card back in the day, and you're now looking at something in the $245 range. And this is the, I don't know how necessarily this graph is charted, but if we assume that it's an average median listed price even, that's bananas. And if this has any kind of sales data, it just goes to tell you, right? This card has been on a meteoric rise. This is 4 times the value in 1 calendar year, which is impressive to say the least. 2 very popular Pokemon. That's the story. I think, all things considered, that's one of the things that everybody listening to this video should really kind of pay attention to. You always want to go for cards that have very popular Pokemon in them. Obviously, very popular Pokemon mean more demand, and it also means more people are probably going to be doing that anyway because more people like Mimikyu and Gengar. But all things considered, these are the types of cards that you probably want to scoop up, or the equivalents thereof, in the Scarlet and Violet era. Pick those cards up now because they are going to be cheap and they are going to be simple and easy to pick up. There's a ton of them on the store shelves, which means there's going to be a ton of them on TCG Player, and in the long run, it'll probably help you out quite a bit because, I mean, hey, when, you know, prices start trending upwards, you'll be able to take advantage of that for whatever it is you choose to do with the cards. Buy and sell them, use them as an investment mechanism, etc., etc. Next up is the infamous ADP, Arceus, Dialga, and Palkia. So I know this is one of the cards. Yeah, that was the worst offender for how powerfully game-breaking a rulebox Pokemon can become. Yeah, this was like the card. It literally broke everything in the TCG. I believe it became banned in certain formats. So a very powerful card, very well remembered. And interestingly enough, a $189 price point. We were looking at $160. So if anything, this card has been kind of high up there, coming from Cosmic Eclipse, but ironically enough, hasn't necessarily gone up in value as much as we would have wanted it to. And even though this price history chart looks similar to ones we've seen today, I do want to point out it starts at about 125, goes up about 155, which is a whopping 20 bucks. And similarly, we're looking at a $190 card that was a $160 card, about 30 bucks. So honestly, here's what I know about this card. This card has always kind of consistently remained expensive. I remember that this card, I purchased it for $100, maybe a year after Cosmic Eclipse came out. So I believe we were post Hidden Fates, but we were, I believe, maybe still waiting for Sword and Shield. So this card has consistently been very expensive. It was very in demand for a variety of reasons, and people love the alternate art version of the card specifically because it features a statue of the Pokemon, which was just one of those really cool, interesting things. Also, shout out to the alternate arts. You know how much I hate you, or love you, depending on the day. Next up is the Mew and Mewtwo GX Secret Rare. Another rainbow rare, wouldn't you be surprised? Currently, or back in the day, would have been $156, rounded up, and now a $209 card. Effectively, about a 33% increase in price. Yeah, and as you can see here, this kind of goes a little bit more return to form, right? Starts at about 110, ends up at about 155. Talking about a $50 gap there. Yeah, sounds about consistent. And as you can see, there are these weird little pockets of time where the price is kind of flat, probably because no one was buying, or because the people who were buying were setting these new records and kind of stalling out and waiting. And then a little bit of panic kicks in, and boom, someone sets a new price, and boom, another new price. And now we're in that waiting game yet again. And you can see here, there's actually quite a few sales. You know, you're looking at $2.99. Now, I don't know why that doesn't cause this to be higher, or why this isn't even higher, other than the fact that it's a near mint holo foil, but I assume over time you'll continue to see that upward trend kind of play out as, you know, more of these cards get listed for sale now that people who have been holding these cards have the ability to kind of liquidate some, free up some money, free up some binder space, whatever have you. Next up is, a Charizard. Surprise, surprise. So there were Charizards, Charizard and Braixen to be specific, and was $101.67 or $102 roughly. You're now looking at a $98 card. So this is interesting. The reason I think this is interesting is because if you look at this chart, notice that a lot of the growth kind of happens a little bit more back in the day, and notice that this is the smallest gap we've seen. $90 at the bottom to $102 at the top. It's a $12 difference, approximately maybe 8, 9, 10% of its original price. And that's how much it's crept up over the past couple months. Now, even if we roll back a year, what you'll notice is that this card has actually been higher, or about as high as it's ever been in the past, back in September, and now it's actually slightly below that. So why is it that a card like this one could potentially be suffering from what we see here? A chart that, for all intents and purposes, completely bucks every other trend that we've observed up till now. Well, I have a couple thoughts on that. One, as popular as Charizard is, Braixen is not. So where every other card we've seen today has benefited from the other cards in the tag team, you know, Braixen's a starter Pokemon, and so I admit that I can see it being very popular amongst a group of people, but I don't think that's what, at the end of the day, drives prices. A Pokemon that is popular is a Pokemon that is truly popular in every sense of the word, and up till now, I don't think Braixen has been given the time or the attention to really kind of get to the point where I can affirmatively say Braixen is going to carry this card equally with Charizard. The other thing is that from an anecdotal perspective, I remember when Cosmic Eclipse came out, and people just weren't that impressed with this card. You know, everyone was saying when it was originally announced, oh, look, another Charizard. Bear in mind, we had already had Hidden Fates. Bear in mind, there were other Charizards kind of spread out through the past. But one of the things was that no one was kind of impressed, maybe because Braixen was actually holding back Charizard. So whereas Charizard itself may have been a better seller, this card necessarily wasn't. So it shot up to the price that it did. and then it just kind of stayed there, and then it kind of fluctuates within a particular band because it's not the best card ever. Interestingly enough, I would also argue maybe Charizard doesn't get to carry the kind of weight it does amongst tag team cards. Tag team cards have their own kind of mechanic to them, and more importantly from a collectability perspective, it's usually very popular Pokemon paired together. Charizard's great because Charizard is a fire starter Pokemon from Generation 1. However, when you compare just that one Pokemon to maybe something like Mew and Mewtwo, or ADP, or Gengar and Mimikyu, maybe, just maybe, the popularity of two Pokemon kind of outweighs the Charizard, and as a result, Charizard can't necessarily carry itself comparatively in terms of price to some of these other cards that we're seeing. So super interesting theory and thought process there. Now, the other Charizard card, surprise, surprise, there's another one that got released as Reshiram and Charizard. So this card featured the opposite Generation 5 box art legendary. So it was Pikachu and Zekrom, and then Charizard and Reshiram. It was $137, but if we click over here, it's now $90. And if we go looking for a near mint copy, can we find one? As you can see, most of them are in the $130 range at max. I'm gonna try to sort this price high. And yeah, this looks, I mean, absolutely insane. Yeah, I could buy one today for $138. Again, if I come over here and I look, $138. So realistically, price movement on this card too has been kind of flat. Really interesting. If we look at the past 3 months, it's actually on a downtrend. If we look at the past year, again, kind of on a downtrend, down about $20. So really interesting. Again, my theory here is that Charizard's great on its own. It's often a very expensive card in whatever set it comes out in. However, when you put Charizard compared to any other tag team, it's often the case that it doesn't get to carry its own weight. In all fairness to Charizard, the other thing I should probably say is these are not alternate art cards, these are rainbow rares. So both of these cards that we spoke about are rainbow rares. I don't believe there were alternate art versions of these cards released, and that could in theory impact the priceability of some of these cards. Now, the big one, the oh dear, oh me, oh my type of card. Latios and Latias GX, the alternate art full art rare from Team Up, one of the OG cards from the Sun and Moon era that kicked it all off. Here it is. Couple things about this card. It's the most expensive one by far, period. This is turning out to be the Moonbryon of the Sun and Moon era, just in retrospect. It's kind of weird how that worked, because we would have assumed it would have been the Hidden Fates Charizard, and I'll show you guys that in a minute. But if you look right here, you've actually got $850 near mint holofoil. This is another listing that I've seen used to talk about what's going on right now. If we go and look, 410 to 490, we're looking at about a 20% more or less increase in price over the past 3 months. If I go to a year, you're looking at 250 all the way up to 497. You're talking about 100% increase in price. So surprise, surprise, the most expensive card numerically has also seen the greatest percentage increase in price over a period of time, according to this price history, as well as the sheer dollar value of one listing that we're looking at right here. And again, if you go looking, you won't be surprised, but latest sales are, yeah, kind of in that range. Some lucky duck back in 420 got one for $447. After that, 800s all day, every day. Here we are. That probably corresponds maybe with this right here. So if this is the $400 range, which it approximately looks like, and then here's where kind of everything else goes up. And I believe this is going to be an average, because this probably also considers things like damaged and lightly played and moderately played, which could be the reason why we see this kind of dragging down the price. But you still get the general price trend, and right here you can see the near mints kind of behaving the way that they are. So really, really interesting there. Really, really interesting. Now, just to kind of prove what I was saying, here is the Hidden Fates Charizard, And you'd be surprised to find out that a near mint sold for only 600. Now, you might say, oh, well, Ryan, 600, that's a really expensive card. Yeah, that's a Moonbreon. But surprisingly enough, it is not the most expensive card right now from the Sun and Moon era. And I realize that, the most expensive title can change. But here you go. Proof in the pudding that the team-up card carries more weight than a shiny individual Charizard card, which is pretty fascinating if you ask me. I think, again, it just kind of goes to show Charizard is one of the most popular and fan favorite cards, but it doesn't necessarily by default always begin to carry the most expensive Pokemon card title assigned to it by, I guess, the masses, right? The first edition Charizard, nobody's going anywhere near that unless it's a trophy card or unless it's something very esoteric. However, post Generation 1, when you're looking at all the other cards that have come out, I think we're starting to see a pattern here. Gold Star Charizard got beat out by Gold Star Rayquaza, and, just another random example, when there is a qualified competitor like a Latios or Latias GX tag team card, it does beat out empirically 850 to 598. So I think it's fascinating. I always see the hype around Charizard cards, but I think that creates an opportunity for those of us who are ambitious enough to understand what's going on. People will always flock to what they're comfortable with, which is the Charizard cards. They will always pour money into them, which is fine. And at the end of the day, assuming you bought for anything cheaper than this, you could have done all right for yourself, right? Even the person who bought a couple days ago made $200 if they sold the same card. However, if you're really, really into it, this card was a $100 card at a point. I remember this card being a $100 card because I bought a bunch at $100. And now, 8.5 times that amount of money in a matter of years. It's, it just goes to show. If you really stop and think about it, there are some really cool opportunities that out there for some absolutely gorgeous cards that are so overlooked in the grand scheme of things. But with all that said, friends, thanks again for checking out another video. I hope today's video was helpful, informative, and maybe kind of help put into perspective what you've been hearing about these price trends in the recent couple of months. Other than that, thanks again for checking out another video and stopping by. I appreciate your viewership as always, and hey, if you're not already, consider subscribing to become part of the Gengar Gang. Other than that, I appreciate your time. Thanks again for stopping by, and we will talk soon. Peace.